Everyone has a price. Like, nobody is loyal. How can you tell employees that AI is going to replace their jobs and then expect them to stay motivated and expect them to stay? Is Apple falling from the sky? Welcome to the Vanessa Podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Sanyauke. This is a weekly business and culture podcast where I will break down the latest news in business, what's happening in the workplace and culture so that we can all understand how it all impacts us. But before we get started, I have one request from you all. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave me a 5-star review and also a comment. It lets other people find our community. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Subscribe. It helps more people find our community as well on that platform. Share it, leave a comment, leave a like. You know what to do. Help your girl. Okay, so this week's news, I'm going to get straight into it because we have a lot to cover. Okay, so my first story is tech bro news. I think this week's episode is a lot of tech bro news, okay? So it's from OpenAI and Meta. Now, they are doing a back and forth. Apparently, according to the Financial Times, OpenAI says that Meta is trying to poach their staff and they are offering them $100 million sign up packages. And I've even read that Mark Zuckerberg basically plans to create this dream super team of execs who are going to be the best in class, the best in the world in AI. And he wants them to report directly to him. And I also read that he is even offering some people 9-figure salaries. And I spoke about this on the last episode. But the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, is not happy about this at all. So it's reported that the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, he's accused Mark Zuckerberg of trying to poach his developers with the promise of $100 million sign-on bonuses and even higher salaries. And the social media platform is in a race to catch up in the AI battle. And it's actually interesting because I think they at some point were, because Microsoft is a major shareholder in OpenAI. And I remember Mark Zuckerberg was interviewing the CEO of Microsoft. So it seems like they are all kind of tech bro friendly, but you know, Mark has been called out for maybe not being so friendly. So it says that Meta has a market capitalization of $1.8 trillion. And they have begun to make giant offers to employees, current employees of OpenAI, as they are falling behind their current AI push. And I quote, Sam says, I've heard that Meta thinks of us as their biggest competitor. And he said this on the Uncapped podcast, which his brother hosts. And he says also, I think it's rational for them to keep trying. Their current AI efforts haven't worked as well as they would have hoped. And I respect them for continuing to be aggressive. So he's actually saying, do you know what? I respect it. But he said that none of his best people have taken Zuckerberg up on their offers. This is quite interesting. So my thoughts are as follows. I think I said this before in a couple of episodes back that I feel like when Mark Zuckerberg in particular tries to copy the competition, it doesn't always work well. And I always question, sometimes isn't it best to be the best at what you do, if that makes sense? So Facebook, Mark is the ultimate innovator of social networks. Like Facebook is the alpha, the ogre of social media networks. And he was very strategic, very smart. He bought WhatsApp and he bought Instagram, I think for $1 billion each. And they're worth 20-fold that now. So he's very smart. And I feel like, why not double down on being just the best in what you do? I think also, as I mentioned before, I think this AI thing, it's very much like the virtual reality hype we had during the pandemic. All of us were stuck indoors and there was all of this talk around creating a, I guess, like super universe online, right? And people, I saw a lot of companies, especially, I think it was KPMG. I was talking to some of their team in early careers, and they were trying to create this whole kind of like VR universe and investing in that because they felt it was the future. But everyone's now back in person, and actually it's the opposite. People want more in-person interactions. So I feel like we need to be careful. Again, I've said this so many times about jumping on the bandwagon of AI. Maybe that's not what he needs to do. If Mark Zuckerberg is looking to offer people like billions in salaries, you really need to be like 100% sure that AI is it. And I'm not too sure. So I'll be watching the story as it unfolds. There's not much more to say about this. I think it could be a waste of money. And I also think with Sam, the CEO of OpenAI, everyone has a price. Everyone has a price. Like, nobody is loyal. It's just that maybe Mark's price needs to go higher. I'm sure if Mark offered them $1 trillion as a salary, just for an example, they would all jump ship. Everyone has a price. Next up in Tech Bro news, according to the Business Insider, Amazon employees are slamming the CEO Andy Jassy's memo about AI killing corporate jobs. There was, I don't know what it is about CEOs and their memos internally that get leaked out. I mean, that was the Fiverr CEO a couple of episodes back who was just talking about the same thing. He was threatening and I guess scaremongering his employees, saying AI is going to come for your jobs. And now the CEO of Amazon is doing the same. So he told employees last week that AI would shrink the company's corporate workforce over the next few years. He said it's about being more efficient. And the Amazon employees, they weren't having it. They had internal Slack channels and they were cussing him out. They tore into his message saying it was poor leadership. They also said that it was very demotivating. How can you write to your employees saying that AI is going to take your job in a few years? Like, what's the point? How are your employees going to be productive? How is this going to motivate them? Which is a fair point. I've also spoken about this before in previous podcasts, that it's really going to impact middle managers, I think. And one employee actually at Amazon wrote that. They said that middle management in general should and could be replaced by AI and that nobody would notice. And I do think middle management is a bit of a bottleneck, and I think it's not as efficient. It creates more bureaucracy. So I think in that aspect, that's good. There was another debate around how AI should be positioned in a corporate context. Should we be scaremongering employees and saying your jobs are going to be replaced? And I'll quote, someone said, "We need to lead the change in reframing AI as partners." I absolutely agree with this. Even having AI as a teammate or colleague, rather than AI as a replacement or tools. Another person wrote, "It's a slightly different vision than the one Andy alludes to." So I think employees aren't having it. And I think they're right. I think, as I've said before, let's not jump on the bandwagon, because we have already seen with Klarna, their CEO fired a lot of customer service agents, replaced them with AI. It didn't work. And now is having to rehire them. And when you have to rehire people, it actually costs you more. So we need to be cautious. And I agree. How can you tell employees that AI is going to replace their jobs and then expect them to stay motivated and expect them to stay? I don't believe it. It's another hype. It's like the coding hype. It's like the metaverse hype. It's like the virtual reality hype. We've had so many hypes in the last couple of years and nothing's really been substantial. People don't really understand that AI is a tool. And actually, AI is not even new. Machine learning is old school. We've been using machines. We've been training machines for decades. It is not new. It's not going to replace humans. You still need people to input the data, to instruct the AI tools. Like, all of this scaremongering is going to bite these people in the butt. But we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, so I wanted to share an article that I read in The Economist. So I get a online subscription to The Economist, but I also get their weekly magazine, which is interesting. I have kind of paused my subscription for the weekly magazine and I'm just keeping my online subscription. But there was an interesting article around Is Apple falling from the sky? So I'm just going to kind of give you the scoop about this article. So the article says, can Tim Cook stop Apple going the same way as Nokia? So what the Economist is saying is the following. So a year ago, when Apple used a jamboree at its home in Silicon Valley to unveil its latest artificial intelligence strategy, which was known as Apple Intelligence. It was a huge occasion, they're saying. So they said the following day, the firm's value soared by more than $200 billion. And that was one of the biggest single day leaps of any company in history. However, they're saying that there was the excitement that was fueled by the hopes that generative AI would enable Apple to transform their iPhone into a online tech assistant in effect Siri with a brain, which is quite interesting. And they thought it would revolutionize the handset phone industry. However, The Economist is criticizing. They have said that 12 months later, basically nothing's happened. And what they're saying is that Siri had an overhaul, but it has been postponed. And they've said that Apple Intelligence is just no match for what else is out there in terms of Google Gemini and also ChatGPT. They're now saying that Apple used to be listed amongst some of the greatest, most innovative tech companies like Alphabet that owns Google, Meta that owns obviously Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp and Amazon. But they're saying actually, is Apple really innovating? And they are really challenging them. And they're saying that their sort of market cap value is kind of stalled and they just keep bringing out new iPhones. There's nothing really new and exciting. They did bring out their VR headset, but that's very expensive. And I don't think it's really kind of like hit the market. I don't think anyone is really like rushing for a VR headset. And the VR headset that they did release, so let me just break that down. It's around virtual reality. So it's a headset that kind of immerses you and makes you feel like you are in certain environments. So if you put on a virtual reality headset, you put on the headset and you can maybe like feel like you're in like a mountain or on the beach, and it kind of brings your calendar, like as if your calendar is like right in front of you. And it just didn't really land the way that they thought it would. And I think this is interesting. Is Apple falling from the sky? I guess the apple falling from the trees, falling from the sky. I definitely think Tim Cook has a really hard task on his hands, because I think they need to really think about their strategy. Again, do we need like another iPhone? How much can an iPhone 16 be different to an iPhone 17? Is it better to be like every 5 years we update our iPhones, and it's like everyone is waiting in anticipation, and in the 5 years they are working with like the best of the best designers, product people, engineers, like the creators, to create this amazing new sexy iPhone, rather than every year. I personally feel like I'm just underwhelmed. I feel like even with the latest, I've got an iPhone 16 and it's just like the same as the iPhone 15. I had an iPhone 13 and then I got the iPhone 16. And to be honest, I've seen like absolutely no difference apart from like a little bit better camera, but it's not that innovative. And I think maybe Apple need to assess actually, what do we want to be known for? And again, I always cuss out Apple, right? If you see me in an Apple store, I always say to them that I'm here. I'm always in Apple every 5 years to update or upgrade my products. I always joke with the sales assistants and say, I'm back because every 5 years, either my laptop dies or my iPad dies. So for example, this iPad is new. I had got an iPad in 2017, but by 2020, it was like dead. It didn't work. And I was like refusing to spend another like £300 on a new iPad. For me, I feel like if I'm buying a product, that needs to technically last me a good 10 years. Again, my laptop actually did last longer than a lot of other Apple products. And my laptop lasted about 8 years until she passed away this January and I had to buy a new laptop. But again, I didn't see much difference from my laptop in 2017 to now. I tell you, it looks exactly the same. I cannot tell the difference. So I kind of feel like underwhelmed by the products that Apple are bringing out. They really need to assess and I feel like decide, what do we want to be known for? And again, with Apple Music, like I subscribe to Apple Music just because I got a free subscription with my upgrade. I have Apple TV subscription. I'm just not wowed. I feel like with Apple Music, I feel that the playlists on Spotify are better. I feel like there just needs to be a bit more like creativity. And it goes back to diversity. I do feel like Apple, they're not necessarily like, they don't scream about their diversity and inclusion. And it goes to show if you don't have a diverse workforce and get different people with different ideas, you become stagnant. And I feel like they need to actually double down and invest properly on getting like young people through the doors. We used to work with Apple. So we worked with Beats by Dre and Apple like on a program 1 year. And I have to be transparent, like they do not even have like resources for diversity and inclusion in terms of like investing. They don't invest significant resources given that they're worth $1 trillion plus. So it kind of shows that they keep bringing out the same products. If you have the same white men leading the business, bringing out the same old shit, you're not going to get innovation. And I feel like people need to understand when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not because we want more blacks and more women just because we feel like, oh, woe is us. Yeah, it's not fair that we're left out, but it's actually impacting you as a business. You keep bringing out the same crusty versions of things. And it's like, it's because you've got the same people in the same room. Invest in getting like this guy who's crazy from maybe, I don't know, Bangladesh, who's so like witty and got different ideas, or this girl who's cool in Lagos, who could change your business. Like, surely the future is out there and you've got to invest. I think these companies, they've got to a point where they've got to a certain level and it's like, you guys, you need to change up who's in the boardroom. Get some young people in the boardroom. Switch it up. You can't be doing the same thing. So I definitely feel like this article, I mean, they just went in analyzing just how basically like out of date Apple are. They're questioning the Tim Cook, and they're just saying that he's got a tenure of an obsession with privacy, with high walls. Yeah, they're very secretive, Apple, as well. And they're basically saying, look, you're all kind of hush, 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 and you're just not cutting it. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so I wanted to cover this story as my last story. So LVMH, so Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, so they own loads of brands, like fashion brands, obviously Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy, but they also own the champagne brand Verve and a lot of other like fashion, like high-end fashion brands. And they've had a slump and people are now questioning the CEO. So according to LinkedIn News, they've said, is the road running out for Bernard Arnault, who is LVMH's longtime CEO? It's a bit like a family dynasty, like the CEO of LVMH is now putting his kids and family like as CEOs of different businesses. And I think the tricky thing about doing that is it really a recipe for success to have this kind of family dynasty? You really should, in my opinion, have the best people for the job. So they've said the luxury conglomerate shares have fallen. So they have wiped out, oh my gosh, 221 billion euros off its market value. And this was according to Bloomberg News. So Bloomberg News reports that investors are beginning to question whether the 76-year-old is the right person to weather the storm. So they've said acquisitions have ballooned the business to more than 75 brands. They've been on a buying spree, buying out brands, but many are not giving returns. And so that's made it kind of really go down in value and they're not making any profits. They've said that there is an unclear succession plan involving Arnault's 5 children, and that is making investors nervous. Bloomberg have said that we have never seen so many red flags. Whoa, what do I think about that? I think I kind of just shared my feedback when I was giving my commentary. Sometimes this family dynasty can be the downfall. I think if you look at even the Murdochs, I mean, that empire is kind of like the Murdoch family and the empire, in terms of their brand, they used to be up here. And then when you kind of make it a family business now, his empire, I mean, he's still rich, but their businesses are not like, he's not the scary media mogul that he once was. I think at one point he had his daughter running the business or his son, but they're all fighting, blah, blah, blah. It's boring. I think sometimes like when you are a CEO and a founder, right, you have to make a difficult choice. Yes, I think the family will always benefit because they're going to be shareholders. So I think it's about the business, getting the best talent, trying to see who's going to succeed. Why do your 5 children have to be a successor? Why can't you find somebody external and just get your kids to sit on the board as advisors so they make sure that the family, ethos and vision is not lost? But there's just so many red flags. I don't mean any disrespect. I'm not trying to be ageist, but I also think at 76 years old, that's the point where you want to be enjoying the fruits of your labor. It's a very stressful business. They own 75 brands. Is it time for him to step aside? Are his kids the best fit, as I've mentioned? And it goes back to innovation and who is in the boardroom making these decisions? Who decided, yes, we're going to just acquire so many different brands? It goes back to the people in the boardroom. If you just have loads of men, loads of white people, let's put it frankly, in the boardroom, what we're seeing is it really paying off? We need to have fresh voices, fresh ideas to exist in the new world. And I feel like when we look at companies like Apple, like what we're seeing with LVMH, like what we're seeing with the Amazon CEO scaring their employees, it's just, this is screaming in business leaders' faces and they don't want to face the reality. Like, is it time for the old adage of white men in a boardroom, safe pair of hands? Are white men in a boardroom really a safe pair of hands, or are they the downfall of future businesses? And I could go further and say, is it older white men? What about new, young people, disabled, people from the LGBTQ plus community, those who didn't come from wealthy backgrounds? Diversity is not just women and blacks, as some white men like to think. It's just a nice mix of fresh ideas. Diversity is fresh ideas. And it's like when I'm reading these stories, what's screaming out to me is like, who's working for these companies? And also, it brings up a point that I run a community for senior leaders. And these are women who are in Berlin, London, around the world. We're going to expand. It's called House on the Hill. And these are women who are VPs, directors, heads of, but they're not necessarily in the C-suite. But some of them want to get in the C-suite, or some of them want to sit on these boards that direct the vision and the success of these large businesses. And I'm doing a lot of work to push these women to think about themselves as leaders. And what I've seen is a lot of leaders have blind spots. And what I'm seeing is when these businesses are failing, I'm thinking the leaders, so the executive team and their maybe direct reports, how effective is their leadership? And what I find is leaders think, well, I've got to where I've got to. I'm a good leader. I know what I'm doing. I'm bulldozy. I've had to fight to get to where I am. And what do? Some of them, and not all, but sometimes as leaders, and I'm so guilty of it. I mean, I'm not like Louis Vuitton CEO level, but I know as a CEO and a founder, I can get as well. Like, I don't always see my blind spots. And sometimes you do think, sometimes you know everything. And I have to step back and think, like, you don't know everything. And I'm always trying to gently push the women in my community to say, do you know everything? Why do you think you're a good leader? Are you a good leader? What would your team say about you? And I always say, you're never too senior to learn. And if you think you're too senior to learn, it's going to be your downfall. And so I would love to deep dive into the leaders of the exec teams of LVMH. And really, I'd love to speak to them and get their insights and see what's going on there. And I bet you it's leadership, leaders thinking they know everything. And I always say to the women in my community, never dismiss someone, because The guy in Lidl or the guy on the plane who you think is just a flight attendant could spark an idea, or the person who you meet in your everyday could be the one that gives you an idea, could be the one that gives you a contact to your next amazing hire. And I think sometimes, as leaders, we get bogged down. Leaders, you're busy, especially leaders in a big corporate and conglomerate like LVMH. You get bogged down in the day-to-day. You might not even have time to go to the toilet, but just take time to smell the roses. Take time, carve out time for your development. Even at that level, there's so much to learn. And I feel like maybe they're not learning and they're in survival. And that's what happens. You get stagnant. 221 billion euros to be wiped off your valuation, your market cap, is significant. And I think we need to look at the leadership and give them compassion and say, do you know what? Something is wrong here. So that would be my take. I'm going to keep an eye on that and see what happens with LVMH. That's it from me. We've come to the end. Thanks for listening and watching. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week.